So yes, so I was in Marrakesh in 2012, looking for ways to construct kind of installation that reflects the kind of local tradition of carpet making, but makes it a large one-to-one installation. Because you have to understand that the Biennale was an art and architecture Biennale, more art than architecture. So as an architect, I thought it was necessary to provide some kind of space for the Biennale. But the idea was to do something that is very open and kind of is a mix of things that I bring from Berlin to Marrakesh, which is a more of a kind of, let's say, digital form finding process. And the traditional kind of art on site. So the theme of the art was the Atlas Mountains, which is the kind of mountain chain in Morocco, and from the site, you could, on a clear day, you would see the mountains. So these things kind of came together in the form of a tent that kind of also reflects the idea of nomadism and the idea of temporary architecture. For a Biennale, you come and you bring something and then it's there for 3 months and you take it down. So the idea of temporary architecture was a kind of driver. So in Marrakesh, as a kind of construction, maybe there is one side, is a construction market. So you made inspiration out, and for instance, finding these old 1950s flour bags, and then if you want to buy sand, you can go to these guys and you buy sand in a donkey load. So I found this all very cool.
C'è bisogno, vero?
Translation.
Devo tradurre? No, vero?
È una biennale di arte ed architettura a Marrakesh, dove lui ha pensato di fare questo intervento che si inserisce in una serie di interventi di arte, ma ha un carattere d'architettura, voleva costruire uno spazio, per cui ha pensato a qualcosa appunto che fosse performativo ma allo stesso tempo producesse uno spazio. Non è difficile inventarsi dei materiali da costruzione in Marocco, perché ovviamente le case vanno con la terra, con legno e con piccoli dettagli, e quindi si è messo alla caccia di questi materiali.
Okay, so I kind of got my materials together, which were in the kind of reality of actually making things in the city and making it quick. So as connections were, I had these wood sticks ready, and so I designed some kind of material system that kind of puts these things together. So there's the sack with the sand in it, there's the piece of wood, and there's the yarn. And so we started looking at ways of making this a three-dimensional structure by kind of twisting these the kind of bars of the loom always in a kind of 45 degrees angle, so it creates these kind of hyperbolic surfaces. And we then went back to Marrakesh and looked at the kind of situation at that mosque, which we were assigned to, and designed this kind of like field condition of it. Weaving the hell out of it, which was a nice process, a very kind of intense 2 weeks of like kind of calculating the amount of time it takes, the amount of material. And so we could say after a few days that we have to speed up heavily, otherwise we won't make it. So we increased the spacing. And in the end, it became this large kind of piece of geometry that is kind of reflecting the kind of rhythm of these elements. So you have to see that this here is the area where there was a mosque before they deconstructed this mosque and built this mosque in the 14th century. So this place here in the middle it used to be the courtyard, and these cisterns here where you would wash your feet before prayer. So the installation sits in there and it takes the spacing of these columns, height of these columns, and so the kind of scale is something where you would have space pockets that are kind of aligned to each other, but always you have to kind of duck down and go from one to the other, which again refers to the idea of a kind of nomad lifestyle that is traditional to the Atlas Mountain and the area around this for the Berbers. So yeah, this is the kind of interior of it. Here's another one. You see here a person, so the whole thing was kind of 20 by 20 meters. Actually, when I walked into the university, I saw this kind of thing in the middle. I was like, all right, tell me something new. So more like I tell you something new.
How long did you stay up?
For like 3 months. Yeah, I hadn't seen it in the end. I made it and then I left, and then someone told me they kind of went in with like scissors and just took it apart. Yeah. So the next installation is called Thicket, which I also did with Sparko Leibinger, and it is the idea of kind of combining kind of two very separate worlds. So as a kind of concept, the idea was to look at a spatial phenomena that you will find in nature, like a thicket. So this here would maybe be considered a thicket. So something of a kind of natural space that is made of a kind of density of sticks and branches. And the thicket is also something that is known to get lost in. Like the thicket is very confusing space, a small kind of like a labyrinth. So I was interested in kind of creating something that mimics the qualities, or even the non-existing qualities, maybe the downsides of a thicket, to see where the limits of the perception of space maybe are. And the other side is how to make it. I was looking at these clothes hangers, which you all know. If you take your shirts to the laundry, you get it back, you have this cheap clothes hanger like this. And you probably keep it for a little bit, but then at some point you have tons of them and you throw them away. And I was wondering, where do these come from? Because it's somehow very delicate, it's like it's really nicely curved, and then they are kind of twisted here, so that must be a machine that does it. So I was researching it, and I found a kind of traditional rod bending company somewhere in southern Germany, and I kind of try to understand what's this about, and it's not a robot, as we know it. It's not like some kind of robot arm that bends these things. It's more like a very old-fashioned machine where they have these kind of roundish metal parts, and they put it in a certain way, and they adjust it, and then they have a full kind of bundle of stainless steel, and they push it through, and it's a manual kind of process to make these things still. And then I was in touch with them, and I asked them, like, so what's the limit of this machine? And they were like, yeah, well, there's no limit. The stainless steel rod comes in like 300 meters length, so you can do whatever you want in length. I mean, there's limits to the workshop maybe, and limits to transportation, but technically you can do what you want. So I was thinking, cool. Maybe it's interesting to try to make the 2 millimeter stainless steel wire a structure, but you can only do that when you add the structure together. Like one of those stainless steel rods obviously doesn't stand up, also not 4 or 5. So it has to become 200 of them in a kind of bundle like this for them to actually stand. So there was a lot of testing, and the idea also was to keep it very simple, because the manufacturing process was not something, like I said, not like a robot where you can say, right, produce me like 200 rods and they're all on the same logic but a little bit different. No, they have to be all the same, otherwise it's impossible. So I designed a bending, which you can see here, which is very subtle, which only through kind of adding it together makes a kind of spatial structural piece. and it creates these kind of densities. So also with this, I found it very interesting to not just design the installation, but also design the making of it. So how do you bundle 200 metal rods together, laying down? Because if you can't have it standing up, you can't hold one and kind of make the other one next to it. So you have to create some kind of what's called a jig, where you place these things and then you can put them together. So we designed this kind of thing, these kind of spacers, and we figured out that using a zip tie gun is the quickest way of putting them together. And so we made this a kind of mass production. So in the beginning, takes 1 day to make one of these columns. The second day you make 2. The third day you make 3 in one day. And in the end, it takes 1 hour to make one because the whole process is so streamlined. It's a bit like, I don't know if you know about Fordism. So the first idea about like mass production of cars, where there was really someone standing and calculating the way it takes the worker to take the screwdriver and do this and then do this. And so that has to be optimized. And so in a way, in small, we kind of exercise some kind of Fordism on this one. And people, do you want to Is anyone? It's well clear, yeah. The images speak for themselves. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, I try to speak slow. So at the same time, while we were kind of designing these components, we were also thinking about a layout. So we tried things out with like a labyrinth where you could walk through different ways, and there will be spaces that encourage you to maybe rest, or others where it's more of a transition space. But it's this kind of, the nature of this bundling makes it a kind of pixelated, kind of Tetris-esque layout. So in the end, we produced 40 of those bundles, so that makes it like 2,000 of these metal rods, and started putting them together in a kind of labyrinth in this gallery, and became this kind of very ephemeral space that was very trippy. And only through the kind of density of these rods you could perceive the space, and there's a difference between structure and wall, and there's like these kind of fluid transitions between these elements. And also through the kind of materiality of it, the stainless steel is reflective. So it always also takes the shape or the color of the surrounding. So if you would be walking in it, you would get this like heavy movement, plus the stainless steel, and it's not a comfortable space. It also was never meant to be a comfortable space. It was more of a kind of paranoia space, or like a kind of a space where you lose your orientation. And so a lot of people were saying like, "Oh, this is sick. I can't stand this. I'm feeling sick in here." It's like, well, it definitely causes some reaction, and you can see where the limits are, and like what is traditionally perceived as a space kind of messes with your head. So the next project is a project I did for the Antarctic Biennale, which was this crazy project by some Russian artists. And so the idea was that some architects, artists, philosophers, and writers and journalists, they all go together on this Russian research boat here and travel to Antarctica to make art and to discuss art and to think about the future of mankind. Nothing less than that. And so why Antarctica? So Antarctica is the last kind of continent on the planet that has no kind of governmental system. It's there's a treaty that a lot of, not all nations, but most of the nations have signed, that they keep Antarctica alone and as it is. And you can go and do research there, but you are not allowed to, you know, to extract fossils. Yeah, you can go, of course, but you can't dig for oil. Yeah. Don't try. And also, you're not allowed to shoot whales.
It's a beautiful.
Yeah, it's a kind of it's a very romantic idea, and Antarctica, so in a way, is very untouched, you know.
And I remember I want to organize the sailing tour, and the guy from the agency would say, no. That's how people die.
Yeah.
Don't care.
Yeah, that's like the sailing trip is something that only a few have survived. I get to this. So, but Antarctica continent. When I asked come up with a project, I thought, okay, what would be the type of architecture that you use when you enter a new land that you don't know and that you want to leave as it is. So, so here there's a photo from the map from the travel. So this is the Antarctic Peninsula. So you come from southern Argentina, Ushuaia, and then you sail over the Drake Passage, which is like super wild piece of water, and then you come into the Antarctic Peninsula. That was in 2017, as you read here. So my project, like I said, was about the idea of traveling Antarctica, and so the Biennale was meant to be this kind of like a nomadic concept. So you stay on the boat, and every now and go on shore, you do some art project, I don't know, walk around, look at things, and then you get back onto the boat. So this is footage from a very famous expedition to Antarctica by Ernest Shackleton. It's like maybe the most famous of all Antarctic expeditions. It basically never made Antarctica. Because they started also in Argentina, where we started, sailed over the Drake Passage, was all fine. And then they got into the Vessel Sea, which is a great kind of a bay. And if you once in a while you see this news where they say another gigantic ice shield just crushed off Antarctica, it's basically happening there most of the time. So they sailed, that was I think 1910, they sailed into the Vessel Sea, and then the boat got stuck in the pack ice, which happens all the time. And then, so they were on the pack ice for a year, hoping for it to kind of open up again. It did never open up. In fact, it started crushing the boat because the boat was stuck in it, and then the ice moves, so that the ice destroys the boat. And this is a photo. So there was this photographer called Scott, who kind of filmed. There's also film footage of this, which you should check out if you have the time. And took these photographs. So here you see the boat failed. So the kind of like, you know, solid, kind of secure space to live got destroyed. And so they had to move all their stuff from the boat onto the ice, and then they started housing in these tents because they had to be flexible. They couldn't stay obviously on this pack ice. They had to move. They had to go to some place where there's land and food, and where they could, you know, try to get back to Argentina. So to this expedition, in the end, they walked on the pack ice for two more years, I think, and they ended up on some penguin island eating penguins for another 6 months, until they built a little sailing boat out of one of the rescue boats and sailed over to some other island in like the midst of Antarctic winter to find help. And then they got back to Argentina, got a real big ship, and collected everyone, and nobody died. So that's the legend. Nobody died. Yeah, it's the most. Yeah, no, I did not. I did not eat a penguin. I might try that. Yeah. Okay, so I decided to make a tent. Obviously, I had to make a tent to bring to Antarctica. So I was looking at the kind of basic geometry of a tent. I wanted to make sure it's strong and specific. So I started experimenting with the idea of spraying the tent with water so it freezes. So this is I was lucky enough that actually there's no sound, which is not good. There's a more exciting video coming up. Yeah, you hear it from my laptop. There's a
Get the mic, please.
to my laptop. Yeah. Okay. So, I thought came at the beginning. What about this guy here?
All right, that's a good one.
So yeah, I started experimenting with this idea about spraying the tent and make it site-specific. To make a tent that can only exist in these heavy conditions of Antarctica, and is made for that. And it's not entirely about fighting the conditions, but seeing if there's a kind of beneficial coexistence between the architecture and the conditions on site. So this is all models, bigger most. You can see how strong this is. There's nothing that is attached to the top. So here's and these guys just stand up like this. It's just cotton and water. And the idea of making a and kind of setting it up in these kind of triangles. So these are, so then actually the time, so here's another model. It's like maybe 1 to 10 model or something at that scale. That's in Berlin still. It's very cold the winter before I went to Antarctica, which is perfect, There's nothing in it. It's just fabric and the ice. So here the nothing in it. It's very like plastic. Down that time. That's realistic to do it. So that was the kind of model, the final model. Yeah, to my left there. See this great. It's okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Also kind of since I looked into already existing structures. So I was taking this windsurfing material, which is very strong and super cheap and very lightweight, because these are all the things that you want if you buy windsurf material, because you have to carry it around. So I made this kind of substructure out of these windsurfing masts. This is a kind of spraying device that you can buy in a construction market. And then in the studio, we started cutting these patterns and was sewing them together. So then I went to Ciorra. This is my tents, which I could also had to take on the airplane. But I had to obviously finish it last second, and then I had to carry it with me. But I like the idea of it, bringing the art around itself. So here goes onto the ship. And then this is the video that I produced. The channel.
To March 2017. End of Antarctic summer. Yeah, and you see these whale bones here, like whale bones. They use that. They use the beach for
taking apart the whales back in the everywhere. Strange vibe on this kind of penguin colony. They're just looking at you. Yeah. So then it becomes the exercise of spraying it with water, and this takes long. You have to wait until it builds up penguins. Yeah. And then when it got darker, it got colder, and then at some point it starts freezing, and you get this like big ice shield. Yeah, right? Yeah. So it's a bit like altered kind of stuff. So yeah, and then it becomes warmer again, and then you can kind of shake it, melts, and it's very fragile. And then you can start kind of taking the you can shake it off basically. The ice and the concrete kind of separating each other again. Okay, so that was this. So this is a project. It's kind of more applied. It's a kind of space in Berlin that I designed. It's kind of beautiful, and there's the idea of flexibility with these kind of like there's no solid walls. It's all made of fabric, and we use different types of geometry. So there's a curtain that runs, and there are these kind of space dividers that you can like set up. These tables are, you can set as a kind of tribune for people to sit on, but you can also make no tables. The lights was kind of custom designed.
This was for people in quarantine.
It looks like it, yeah, but that was just before the quarantine. That was done before, yeah. The spirit was already there. Yeah, it looks like a kind of. On the rooftop, there's the building was done by some other architect, but they made a mistake. The balustrade is closed, so if you sit on a chair, then you can't see anything. It's really exciting. On the one side is this like heavy industrial power plant. On the other side, there's a kind of nature reservoir. So I decided to build a thing that lifts up. We need to watch it basically, and so it has this part and took the random plans and construction site downstairs and created a kind of dystopian kind of landscape, like very dehumanized, very industrial. Okay, okay, now quarantine. Yeah, architecture. Yeah, so yeah, when the pandemic started, I was talking to my friend Carsten Chen, who's a professor of architecture theory in Princeton, and we were just talking about it as like what's on the menu now for architects. Like it's a new situation, and it's obviously a spatial situation. You know, people are now at home. Offices don't work anymore because the space is not allowing them to be in there. Schools are closed. It's because of the architecture. You know, it's, architecture has to, you know, deliver a healthy place for us to come together. And then the idea of quarantine. So quarantine is obviously, as we all know, is coming from the 40 days. And I think this Lazaretto in Ancona is one of the first buildings which were about quarantine. So if there's a sailing boat or soldiers coming in, they had to stay there for 40 days before they were able to leave it and enter the country. And then here up here you see during the Spanish flu, or I don't know, maybe it was before the Spanish flu, but there were quarantine camps already for other diseases in Northern Africa, where you already see there's, you know, a kind of communal space, but there's also like parts where they are like behind some kind of curtain, and you know, there's some kind of zoning happening already, and it's a kind of weird drawing. Like up here you see these tents in some kind of village. So, and then you see this, which was maybe the biggest quarantine camp indoors in the Javits Center in New York, which is basically these kind of cardboard walls and like a bed and a curtain. And so, and obviously we know that quarantine is meaning 40 days, but the corona pandemic was always 14 days. So we thought about it and we were thinking like, okay, maybe it's actually an interesting new concept of time and space. 14 days in a kind of isolated situation is a new concept, and we started thinking about it, and we decided that first of all, it's not quarantine anymore; it's fortnight. And a fortnight is 14 days. It's an old English word, like 14 nights. And like we said, quarantining is then fortnightism. So it's more than just sitting there and not doing anything for 14 days, but it's a new concept of. So the 10 of architecture can be set up immediately and can scale up towards 10 again. So we designed a kind of system of these cells, which were just big enough to have a comfortable life in there. And you know, then we distributed this over a larger kind of and thinking about zone like subdivision. And we were thinking about quarantine as a concept of something where people have to be entirely isolated, but also quarantine as a group experience. Because, for instance, if you travel to Australia, you would travel in a plane with like 200 other people, and then you go to quarantine. Technically, you could do the quarantine together because you already, you know, did could in the plane to spread the virus. So here we said like, it could be something where this becomes international travel, or it becomes part of like, let's say, a whole, let's say there's an outbreak somewhere, a neighborhood test or somewhere, these kind of situations. So we didn't think about it as only entirely isolated persons. So we thought about what activity you can go do there. So it's like work, kids could continue school, but also there's this like a strong connection to the extra, because we said one thing you do is if you want to take a group of people out of the city, you take them out of the city and you put them in which is healthy and has a surplus. You know, there's, you know, it's different, and it makes sense to spatially disconnect. So there was a design of looked at it's like who developed a kind of system of high point and low point, which is what you want in a kind of straight-line design, because you create these kind of cell surfaces. There's a lot of theory behind this, but technically the idea of high and low one. We designed this kind of system together. So there's a lot of kind of technical template, and then the individual cell is like, you know, as we know it, kind of using the idea about comfort also as a driver for community. The more exterior a space is, the more communal it is, because that's when the virus is not so effective. So that's what's happening right now. Like, you can have a gathering outside, but you can't inside. So maybe there's a gradient between this. So it's a lot of interesting questions. The idea about separation, and, you know, the idea of food delivery and all these things came in, and we designed kind of furniture that allows you to only sit apart from each other. So now I'm going to show a movie, which unfortunately...
In a short few weeks' time, the 2020 coronavirus pandemic has revealed architecture's inadequacy in responding to environmental and health crises. If humanity is entering an age of pandemics, quickly constructed field hospitals with rows of identical hospital beds will not be sufficient in addressing the increased amount of time we will need to spend in quarantine. The ecosystem, the natural world which includes coronaviruses, does not operate within fixed spatial and temporal frameworks. Viruses bloom, proliferate, and vanish unpredictably. Pandemics will become a regular feature of humanity's future. Before vaccines for new viruses can be developed, the most effective way to stop viral spread is by codifying social distancing guidelines. Virus outbreaks don't occur within fixed borders and timeframes, so neither should architecture's response. The global development of viral spread is hard to predict. An architectural response needs to be like a virus: adaptable, mobile, scalable, and resilient. The virus is not fixed in space and time, neither should the architecture designed to counter it. The pathogenic world increases the space and time between us. The responsive care center is a distributed, scalable, transportable medical quarantine facility, deployable in multiple locations at the first sign of a novel virus. Depending on the nature of the disease at hand, the responsive care center can be rearranged to accommodate various residential densities. The building consists of spatial layers. Movable antibacterial fabric hangs from the tent, separating interiors while allowing light to pass through. The architectural unit is essentially a system of tensile fabric atop an infrastructural plinth. Each resident is given their own private quarters, fitted with a built-in shower, toilet, and work area. A hutch allows for contactless delivery of meals and medicine. Plugging into existing networks, the responsive care center is like a branch grafted onto a tree, bringing in energy, supporting health. Rather than the logic of efficiency, the architecture of the responsive care center follows the principles of salutogenic design, a method of design that is focused on health and well-being rather than disease. The 2-week quarantine period, a fortnight, introduces a new social category of space and time. A new conception of time will produce new cultural phenomena. Neither a vacation nor a seamless continuation of daily life, the time spent at the responsive care center will combine work with healing, self-care with self-awareness. Fortnightism is a new paradigm born of both uncertainty and diligence. As a method, fortnightism dismantles human supremacy by insisting on humanity's precarity in the face of climate and ecological change. Healing and reshaping both the body and the mind, the center challenges Western habits of consumption and comfort. What temperatures can we accept without artificial heating and cooling? How should we define personal space? Fortnightism builds periods of slowness into our lives. It is a revolution by deceleration. Tent fabric fitted with photovoltaic cells covers large expanses. Stored in shipping containers that double as clinics when deployed, the lightweight tent structure is easily shipped to any location experiencing an outbreak. Understanding viral outbreaks is a sign of imbalance in the natural world, an imbalance caused by humans. The Responsive Care Center is also a training facility for a new relationship between humanity and the world. Through the Responsive Care Center, fortnightism emerges as both a defense mechanism for the well-being of humanity and an architectural technology for multi-species cohabitation.
Okay, yeah, so that was this, and yeah, no, it is. So there was already an idea about architecture is really necessary. What's the lightest possible kind of material system that you can use? Microphone. Okay, yeah. Sorry. What's the lightest? Maybe this one. So piece of architecture. So I was in Istanbul a couple of years ago, and I saw these dancers, which probably some of you already have seen. And I like the idea about the that creates a space, the idea of using a centrifugal process to actually make a structure that has no solid materials. So in other words, I was interested in creating an architecture that has no structure, only fabric, so softer, the softest possible. And so I was looking at this kind of geometry, and turns out that it's the same geometry that creates the so-called Rossby waves, which is this it's the same principle, the same physical law that creates this, and which creates this kind of global weather phenomenon. It's the same principle. The Earth rotates, and there's a linear force, which is wind, and these two things together create this kind of these secondary waves. So obviously the question was, can I make this a piece of architecture? It started off as a kind of playful little exercise, but turned out to be quite interesting and scalable. So in the beginning, I was really just trying it out with a small piece of fabric. You can see how this works. And when I tried this, I was like, okay, there's something to it. Let's scale it up. Bigger and bigger. I tried different jobs. This is an old parachute. Tried with that. Then I made it even bigger. This was at Villa Massimo. So this is like 4 meters, which already, it doesn't look so big here, but it's already quite a beast. And you could tell that it's like something that can get bigger and bigger and bigger.
and it just becomes a more technical issue to scale it up. So I like the idea about this kind of softness of it, and also question if this is something that you can find in the atmosphere too. So the atmosphere is is also a kind of architectural shell. And there's this book by Buckminster Fuller, Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, where he in the 60s already talked about the Earth as some kind of spaceship that we fly through space and it's protecting us, and we have to drive it and maintain it in order for it to keep going. And so the project is called From Sun Side to Sun Clips, which is a term that Buckminster Fuller used, and it's different than sunrise and sunset, because sunrise means the sun is rising, so that's actually the sun is moving, but now, as we know, it's not the sun that's moving, it's the earth that's moving. So it's sun side, so you see the sun for the first time, and sun clips is when the sun disappears. So with that term, he kind of stepped away from the idea of the earth being the center of the world, which was back when they framed the coin of sunrise and sunset was the case. So I called the project this because I also wanted to use solar energy to keep it spinning. So the idea is that there's a piece of architecture that is very small, and then when it's needed during the day, when it's meant to give shade and meant to create an atmosphere, because this thing creates wind and it's creating a kind of local weather in a way. So I scaled it up to kind of 8 meters, and so use a not so perfect video, but now much bigger. And it's running on the solar panels. But on the front here, so that's for and it's now kind of like big monster in material. I was creating kind of windows that are moving very not stressful, and very calm in a way. Yeah, then it's over. So, as a concept, it is what it is. It is a piece of architecture, but you could also think about applications of it being a kind of spatial device that also creates a certain climate condition below it, and it kind of sets itself in sync with already existing kind of natural rhythms and phenomena like the sun. And so I found this interesting. So next is a real architectural project as we know it. So this is the campus of the Technical University in Braunschweig, which is a kind of medium-sized city 2 hours from Berlin in the middle of Germany. The Technical University is quite well known in Germany. They have a huge focus on aerospace design and airplane making and this kind of stuff. So there was a competition that was asking for new study more places to work, and so there was a competition, and my friend Max Hacke, we won it, and the concept was basically that we said, so there's also an architecture faculty at the TU Braunschweig, and the architecture faculty is quite well known for its structure, because the students, they organize themselves in so-called like drawing halls or drawing rooms, which goes back to the days when they were actually standing there drawing. And this is a quite interesting concept, because they really left alone. They get a space, and then they, over 10 or 15 years, there's some kind of like organism that keeps going, like a kind of
fraternity, but without all the kind of bullshit to it. It's a real kind of just a kind of social situation where they buy a printer together and they buy model making materials and then they help each other. And yeah, I think it's very good, and also it helps the weaker students to like learn from those more stronger students, all these kind of things. So we said, oh, this is interesting, and maybe we can use that concept and kind of do that for the full university, for all faculties, all disciplines. So we said, all right, first of all, this is a kind of democratic organization. So we said it has to be, so in our definition was that it has to be all equal. Like there's no kind of backside to it, no front side, no premium spot, no kind of bad corner. So we said, okay, it's one big space, and every kind of program like toilets and storage has to go to the center of it, and it becomes this kind of donut space. And the site was asking for a double, like a two-story building to get the amount of floor space, but we said we don't want to close the ground floor from the top floor. We want to make it an open space, but with kind of ideas about these platforms that then again in itself create smaller groups that can maybe be self-organized. And instead of having a kind of central hallway that takes a lot of space and also creates kind of transit areas, we said that the whole building is one big transit area and has these kind of stairs everywhere and lots of entrances from all sides, so that you wouldn't have a seat somewhere and there's like people walking behind your back all the time because they want to go to the exit. Now there's like 8 exits now, so they can enter and go out wherever they want. And so the whole thing is then framed by a glass facade, so everyone has the same, more or less the same quality of daylight. And so also we said that this is also diagrams from the competition, so they're not quite exact anymore. It got better. So we see these balconies at the exterior.
Classi, gruppi auto-organizzati che continuano e che magari poi si fanno per diversi, reagiscono, poi magari si mettono d'accordo con e loro hanno cercato di trasferire questa regione nel
so yeah, here the idea is that we said we're going to provide some outdoor space too. So the building is not just inside a glass box, but it's also outside and provides exterior spaces which are in most of the year are still usable, and it's just very effective to not have everything climatized and covered with a facade. And also it allows people. It's more of an open concept, not closed up to. Starts as a kind of open public space and then it becomes more internalized. So this is the site. It wasn't the site from the beginning. It was moved around a little bit, but this is pretty much the best site you can have on the campus because this is the main access coming from the city, and this is kind of quite nice, kind of post-war modernism. This is the kind of auditorium. This is the library. This is the kind of main historic building. So our building sits just there, and it's kind of in all the walkways of the students. So we said it becomes a kind of a piece of infrastructure, like a kind of social infrastructure. So the idea of it becoming accessible from all directions means that people can kind of run into each other as a kind of anthill kind of concept. And it's kind of three-dimensional continuation of ground floor of campus. So the idea about this is called the forum. So the traditional idea about forum, you go and meet people and you bump into each other, you talk, you exchange ideas. We said, okay, we want this to continue into our building. So it's a kind of landscape idea. So it becomes a pavilion in the end. All kind of sides are more or less equal. It's a kind of module, it sits there. And so one big kind of design driver for us was that it is a flexible structure. So as much as the campus changes, the building has to kind of adapt to it. So let's say you need more area, you put more platforms in, or you need less areas, you want to exhibit, or you want to put a large robot in there or whatever, you take platforms out. Or you want to create an office, you can put a wall in. So, or if the building actually is not usable anymore on that site, you can dismantle it and put it somewhere else. So that's a concept of our, let's say, our take on sustainability, saying that the building in a way can exist as a material system for a very long time, can maybe even go somewhere else through a kind of well-designed structural system, like a furniture almost that you can, there's like smart furniture like USM Hala or something like that, where you have some kind of like smart detail, you can build a kind of tower out of it, you can make a sideboard. So in a way, we made this into a kind of a building concept. So it became this kind of kit of parts. So there's like a lot of repetitive components, and you could like, build different kind of typologies with it. So that's the kind of the final rendering before construction. So where you see the kind of balconies in the exterior, the stairs where you can enter the building through the balconies and go inside. And it's very light and a very slim construction. So these are the interior kind of renderings. The idea is that students can do whatever they want in there. And for instance, these columns, they are 10 by 10 centimeters, so they're very, very slim. But they closed sections, so we managed to, which is a nightmare, but we managed to get all the electricity being inside those columns, so all the plugs and everything is in these columns. So it's very robust. So the structure is quite dense, and the spacing of columns is quite narrow, but therefore everything is very minimal and very small. So in a way, it's something different than, it's obviously not a column-free widespan space, but it's also not a space that is defined by columns. It's something in between, and I think it's very usable. So students are asked to do whatever they want in there. So this is also a model from the competition, where you see these kind of, there's like really interesting situations of like bridges, double height spaces. There's situations now where you have, which is not in this model, but where you have a bridge, a double height space, a facade, a double height space, a bridge. And so it's like this kind of like network of things, and the system of the inside with these platforms continues on the outside. So there's no difference between this. So in a way, we gained a lot of floor plan area and like space for students with this kind of logic. So models. So here's a floor plan. So you have the kind of core with all the kind of necessary like things with a little espresso bar and different zonings. This is a kind of 1 to 10 model that we did once. We see a little bit the material system. So it's all steel, and the floor is made of carpet, which I think is kind of nice. And it will be, there's a lot of emphasis on acoustics because it's a one space concept. So there's a lot of acoustic ceiling and these kind of large 6 meter tall curtains that run in the space. Yeah, well, now it's on site, it's happening. So this is the construction site shot with a drone. You see here the kind of concrete plinths, and you see the kind of a ring of kind of singular little foundations. You see the detailing. Here you see the kind of post-war modernism tower here, and the traditional, like the historic building. This is the kind of, we have a skylight, which is a kind of 3 meter plexi cupola, which you have then no structure, just see the sky. And it's already further than this. Like right now, there's already a roof on it, but I don't have the photos. Tomorrow, the last time was last month. I was there when we took these photos, and you can see the details fresh. There's like rain on it. Everything is demountable. So if you would open this this little thing, then you see one big screw you can untie, and then you can push the beam to the top and take it out. And here you see the beams in the roof. There's the light is embedded in the beam, so there's nothing additional to what we see right now.
I think this would be improved in a system.
I think so. I think so because it's actually designed to be. There is a lot of. It's quite soft. Like we're pushing a lot the kind of limits of how soft architecture can be, because there's, as you see, there's nearly no cross bracing, no diagonals. It's only here you see some, which yeah, we try to. There's no diagonal lines. It's only.
If you give that column to an Italian
engineer, So, yeah, so we were lucky enough. We had this engineering company, quite an advanced engineering company from the very beginning. We had them in the competition. We wanted this super slim structure, and they said, "Yeah, it's possible." And then they had to push it. And now, technically, if there would be like a kind of heavy storm, and the wind would push into the structure possibly could like do this to a degree that maybe like 3 by 3 meter glass panels. And if the structure does this, glass panel obviously doesn't do that. It's either cracks or the rubber gets pressed out, and then you have a problem there. But it's quite soft. But which is okay. I hope. Like, I think if like lots of students will like.
Germany doesn't have
Not there. There's like there's a little bit, but nothing in comparison to here. Nothing worth mentioning. Yeah, well, that's the final image. Yeah, thanks for having me. Any questions?
No, my question is, it's very interesting where è molto interessante come passi da installation a secondo te cosa è più interessante? Is it more important to do buildings, or is it more important to push architecture towards this installation?
I mean, the installation commitment is architecture too, It's space, you can go inside, there's a structure to it. So in a way, I get my architectural satisfaction from those installations. And I mean, the thing is, I like to keep going quite fast. I do an idea and then I move on and I want to explore it more. And the installation scale allows you to just do it yourself, and it's like you don't need big budgets. You just you can explore these things. And obviously, in like building scale, I mean, this thing we won the competition 6 years ago, and now it's like it's too much. Like it's just yeah. In a way, there's a lot. But this is now like, when I walk through the construction site, I look at this and I'll be like, yeah, this is like, it's an installation too. It's just much more complicated. Yeah. Yeah, but in a way, like, I like it in the installation scale. I like to be in full control, and it's a one-man show in a way, and I want, and I need to figure out how to do it, and in architecture, there's a lot of moments where someone would say like, no, this is not possible. And it's like, well, I think it is possible. It's like, no, it's not. And then it's like, yeah, okay, then the conversation ends here. In installation, you would just go and do it. So, I mean, I know, I'm excited to like, go into the next architectural project. I think I'm ready again. Like this was, now I'm not in charge of the construction site, so it's not so much of a nightmare, but it was a nightmare for a long time to push it through, and defend it. Because it always gets attacked, someone will be like, this is ridiculous. Like, yeah.
Noi riflette spesso temi della vita quotidiana e poi diciamo la qualità dei servizi. Ha capito quello che accade nell'Artico quando realizza una sorta di
Si ghiaccia, questa è pianificazione.
ah, ok.
La mattina dentro è una tenda.
È una tenda.
A un certo quando si fa ghiaccio gli toglie la parte strutturale e rimane così. He was asking about the role of this like ordinary things, like the shirt or the hanger.
You know, I think somehow, like, I mean, you have to start with some kind of initial idea, and sometimes you see some kind of, like with the clothes hangers, you see like, look, there's some kind of very cheap product that is actually quite complicated, but it's very cheap and it's very pure. It's made of stainless steel, and then you can think, I think there's potential to do something big with this, and with the dervish skirts also you see it, and it's like, I looked at, there's a very beautiful geometry coming out of it, and that alone can maybe be the beginning of something where you start developing an idea. But I think it can, like, the classical kind of inspiration can come from things where you see potential for it to become, you know, a larger, you know, system of, you know, material. And I think what I like is a bit of magic in these things. So when you think this never holds, but it does. Like, for instance, this here, like, I know there were a lot of structural engineers who said, like, no, it's not gonna work. Like, there has to be cross bracing everywhere. And I said, yeah, it will work. Believe me. If you start calculating these handrails here as a structural piece, if you consider glass to maybe also be a little bit structural, then it works. And then they do the math and it works. And I think what I really like is the kind of magic moment when, you know, with the umbrella, for instance, you know, there were so many tries where then I didn't fly because, you know, the diameter of the disc and top is too small, and it starts kind of curling up, and then it breaks, and like total things. And then in the end, it's like you design an airplane, and then it flies. And with the metal wire, it was the same. You know, we were trying, this thing was always collapsing, and then at some point, it stands. So very fragile, but it stands. You know, and I think that's a little bit of investigative, you know, research. I think it's kind of fun.
Poi ci andiamo a mangiare.
Sì, Luca sta per arrivare.